October 5th, 2004, and we're going to talk about the citrus industry and what it is, what we mean by when we say firing a grove. Today we're recording the history of the citrus industry in North Brevard County, and we have these gentlemen who've been involved in the citrus industry for many years to talk about it, and it's a wonderful story because it's an era that has since gone by. We'll start with this gentleman right here. What is your name, sir? And tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm Coleman Mitchell, and was raised up in the citrus right here in Nevins. And I worked grove work, harvest fruit. I had care crew, you know, market workers. We brought them in, and we had camps. Well, probably you've seen camps down there we had there. And they would stay there and work for maybe 6 months at a time, then they'd move on.
Okay.
Wilson, born in Titusville. I worked citrus, but my primary occupation was in education, in which I labored for 36 years. When I started working grove as a young man, as a young boy, rather, actually, 12, 13 years old, and I still do it.
Okay, what time period are we talking about?
I started working in groves in the late 40s.
Okay.
And I'm still doing it in the year 2004.
Okay, great. And this gentleman?
Yes, ma'am. I am John W. Moore. I came here to Florida from Dorchester, South Carolina, about April of 1953. I went to working for a gentleman who had a grove by the name of Joe Warren. I worked for him, I guess, until about 1957. But I had been working from one person, one grove, to the other one, maybe for about 15 years. I used to pick oranges. Is this what you pick them in? This is your set. We picked them in, and this was the box that you dump them in. Hard work. Work never get no harder than picking oranges. During the time I was picking oranges, you would get, I think this was 9 cents you got for grapefruit, and maybe you got, I think it was about 12 or maybe 15 cents for picking oranges.
Per box?
Per box.
Oh, wow.
That was a big prize.
Hard work. When I first started picking oranges, the first day I remember, I think I picked 3 boxes and ate 2. And as the days go along, I think the second day I picked 7 and went on up to 13, and so I got so I could pick good, but I never was a roller. I was nothing but a sack toter.
Now what's a roller?
That's somebody who can really pick some fruit, you know, maybe pick 100 of these, maybe 125.
Okay.
But the best I could do about 65.
And was that an average?
That was a average.
Okay. How many boxes did you pick?
The most I've ever picked was 72 boxes.
72. And how long did that take usually?
All day, my dear. All day.
All day. And how about Mr. Mitchell?
Well, I run a little over 100 a day.
Oh, wow.
That was taking me about 6 hours though.
6 hours.
Yeah, about 6 hours. Now the fruit, it depends on the trees too, you know. If it was high trees, it would take you longer. But in grapefruit now, I have picked 200 boxes with about 8 hours.
Good, great. What was the competition between the pickers? Tell me about that.
Well, the competition between pickers, the one picker didn't want the other one to outdo him. Now it was a guy that called George Abel. He was what Mr. Moe could say was a roller. And then it moves on down. When George get in the field, he didn't want nobody else to beat him. So yeah, I'm coming along with my sack. I'm gonna try to beat Mr. Abel and pick it. So that was the competition betwixt the pickers. That's the way that worked out.
Between the pickers and the rollers?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Total.
The site told her, they just put him back there and let him pick whatever he could get.
okay. Let's talk a little bit about.
Before we leave that,
Okay. Go ahead.
occasionally you would find slickers in the road.
Oh, what's a slicker?
That would be an individual who would walk ahead, get ahead of you, and ground your trees. In other words, he would pick all of the oranges or grapefruit that were low and leave the tops to you. And whenever you found that, you had a incident. You told him about his parentage.
I see. I see.
One more thing about that pickers. But they didn't pull oranges, they clipped it.
Oh.
And the foreman was so tough on you that if you were supposed to be clipping and dumping in that box, they'll come by and look in that box, and if they see one where you pull, they'll pull your whole box of fruit out on the ground.
Oh my.
Then you have to get out and pick it up. You know, it was real rough. It was real rough. And I said, Lord, I said, I hope you don't come by my house. But when you pick a box of fruit, and then the man come by and dump it out and won't pick it up yourself, you know, that's hard on you. But they used to do all that kind of stuff.
Tell me something about those sacks that y'all have. How did they hook up to you? I see there's a strap that goes over the top. Okay, and there's a hook on the side. How did this work? When you filled that full?
Okay, you're up your ladder. You're not carrying the weight. The ladder is carrying the weight. This is sitting on the ladder, and as it fills up, you drop it down another round. Then when you get it full, you go up to the bag, up to your box like this. Throw it up there just like that, unbutton it, and shake it right out in it.
I see. I see. And then go back up the ladder?
Up the ladder.
Were these ladders made out of wood back then?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And actually, where did they lean? Did they lean up against the tree
Right.
limbs?
Right.
Okay. Also, let's talk a little bit about planting a grove. Which one would you like to talk about that? Okay. What would be entailed in planting a grove?
The first thing that you would do is get the land. Once you got the land, you had to clear it. Take down all of the brush, trees, the whole 9 yards. The major tools were a grubbing hoe, a broad axe, and a crosscut saw. And all of those things are men killers. Hard work, extremely hard work. Once you moved all of the trees off, you went through and you grubbed in the area where you were going to build a mound. In other words, trees were not planted flat. They were planted on a mound.
I see.
And you had to dig the mound up, take all of the roots out, leave them to the side, and you made the mound. Once you made the mound, then basically you were ready to dig a hole, plant the tree, and water the tree.
How did you water the tree?
You usually carried a large barrel of some kind of container that would hold 50, 100, 200 gallons of water. And in the earlier days, they pulled it along with, well, mules, horses, this kind of thing. Later, many of the growers got tractors, and you would pull it along with the tractor. And at that time, you had to dip it out and place it in the ring that you had placed around the tree. And you would water that tree 2 or 3 times a week, depending upon the weather, in order to keep it from wilting. And once the tree roots took, then basically you could slack up on watering it, but you always made sure that the ground had some kind of moisture in it.
How about budding a tree? What did that entail, budding a tree?
Budding a tree, usually if you're talking about a young tree, budding to a young tree, you would find the kind of budwood that you wanted. In order to, I don't have a knife.
Okay, what type of trees are these in back? And talk loud.
These are sour orange trees. These were used primarily for the seeds in order to grow young trees that would be budded. Once they got the size of, say, your pinky, you would come in with the type budwood that you wanted to bud onto it, whether it would be grapefruit, orange, or tangerine. And you would bud onto that. You take a bud and place it within that tree, tie it, and hope that it would take. Once it took, you would come and you would drop the top over and allow that bud to grow. And once that bud grew to a specific height, you would come by and pinch the top off in order to toughen the wood. And you would do that over a period of time, and lo and behold, in 10 years you would have a tree that would bear fruit.
Do you want to demonstrate how you would do that? Mr. Mitchell is going to see if he can cut a bud.
How do you make this thing stay out here?
Is it all here?
It locks.
Is it locked there?
No, it don't work. First, we'll clip the leaves off of that, like that. And right where we clip this leaves off, we're going to cut a piece of budwood. And you never can let your hand touch underneath of that bud.
Why?
Your hands have salt in it. And when it touches that part, it gets into the bud and it won't take.
I see.
So if we were going to put this bud in, we would slice that just like that. And then we would slide this bud. I have to get it where I can't get my hand. I can put my hand on this because it ain't going to stay. And we would slide this bud in there.
Need some tape. You got some tape?
Now the bud is in there. All we need to do is tape it.
I see.
Now that's what they call budding.
Okay.
Now they come out later years, what they call hangs budding. You just cut it a little bit and lay that bud right on that and then wrap it.
And then
This would take 21 days. Only this one about 14.
I
That's
see.
the difference in it.
That's the difference.
So he'll get some tape and we'll just put a little piece of tape.
Okay. And how many, now as I understand, the budders were paid more money?
Well, they charge so much a tree. Back in those days, they only got about 10 cents a tree to bud. But nowadays, they cost you about 50 cents a tree to bud one.
I see.
Yeah, they made more money than the average worker, you know.
Okay, now were there specific people that did the budding?
Oh, yeah. But you know, down through the years, all grove workers learned how to bud. Yeah.
Okay.
Because they always were looking for a little higher, get a little higher and a little higher.
Okay.
So they had to learn how to do all of it. Then they had a pretty good break with the boss man.
Okay. That way you were more versatile.
Right.
Okay. What would be the average amount of trees that could be budded in one day?
Oh, some of those guys bud 500 or 600 trees a day.
Oh.
But now, when they bud 500 or 600 trees a day, he going along sticking the bud in. I come along wrapping it for him.
So you had someone come in and wrap
Yeah.
afterwards?
Yeah, that's
okay.
right.
All right.
But a lot of times the bud are just bud and wrap yourself, you know.
Okay.
Because you got to keep that where air can't hit it.
I see.
If air hit it, it's no good.
Okay, and it's very important to keep the salt from your body off of it,
Right.
correct, or else it won't root?
Never let your hand touch where you cut that bud.
Okay. Well, after you bud it, then what happens to that budding?
All right, after you bud it, the bud takes. Now, I done budded in this now. I come back, this is the top of that tree. I lean that tree over like that, and I let that tree stay. I unwrap this bud. I let that stay right there. When I unwrap this bud, then that bud will start growing out and shoot out a limb. And it'll just start growing like that.
I see.
And just like Mr. Wilson said, after the tree get up so high, then you'll break the bud, nip the top out the tree. Then that causes the tree to spread branches and grow.
So that's why they would do it, to make it produce more.
Yeah, right.
Okay. You want... Yeah.
I mean,
I'm going in and get see if they have some tape, any kind of tape, you understand, simply so he can show you how
Okay.
tape. Okay.
Okay. What kind of tape would you use to wrap that with? Do you remember?
Budding tape.
Budding
It's a
tape.
plastic budding tape.
Okay.
Okay, after we got the bud in, so we gonna wrap this bud in here now. And you got to be careful with the bud. You got to wrap it tight. Want to wrap it so no air can get to that bud. All right, that bud is in there.
Okay.
Now, on this bud here, it takes about 14 to 20 days. And on the hang budding, it takes about 21, 22, up to 27 days. You have to keep watching it and see how it looks.
Okay.
And that is the budding part of it.
Okay. Let's talk to this gentleman about doing some grove work. Where are the groves that you worked in, and how far did people go to work in the groves?
Well, they didn't have to go very far because, like me, I was living in the community.
Okay.
And probably had to go up 3 or 4 miles, up to probably 10 miles.
Okay, and who did you work for? Some of the people?
I worked for Joe Warren. I did most of my work for Indian River Packing Company.
Okay.
I worked for them about 10 years. Worked for Mr. Warren about 3 years.
And where was Joe Warren's groves located?
It's right around in the county. In fact, barely right around here in the neighborhood.
Okay.
He had quite a few groves. All of them was connected to one another, most of them.
Okay.
I guess the first one was maybe a half a mile apart.
What are some of the who are some of the people that you remember that worked in the groves? Some of the old timers and some of the stories that went on back then.
Well, it wasn't many stories that when I come along. It wasn't up to get it, you know. Yeah, I work.
What was a typical work day, for instance?
Typical work day was about 9 hours.
And when did you start?
I start 7 o'clock. Worked at 5, sometimes 6. Just according to the weather. Now, when it get real hot, we would go out early and take a long break, 2 hours break, 12 to 2, and then we'll go back to work. And then you had to work a little later to make up for your lost time.
And what was the season? When did you work in the groves? What was the season?
The season starts about, well, you work in the grove year round.
I see.
But the picking season started about, I would say, the 15th of October and lasts till about the 1st of June.
Oh, that long.
Yeah, it was. Because see, you had 2 crops. You had your early crop, which was your early fruit, and then you had the late crop, they call it the Valencias, which supposed to have been the best oranges. So you got 2 crops to gather in that length of time.
Okay. Who owned some of the groves around here? Do you remember some of the packing houses that were in the area that were really important to the employment of the community back then?
Okay, so the company I worked for, the Indian River Packing Company, it was down at the end of River City, which is about 10 or 12 miles from here. We got the Nevins Packing Company that sits right up there on the hill. Then we got the Mem Citrus sits off the
Exchange.
Mem Citrus Exchange, yeah.
And that was located on Route 46 near
46.
Singleton.
And across from there was the Blue Goose.
Yeah.
And who owned the Blue Goose, do you remember?
That was
Down duck on that.
that was the same individuals that own Disney World. Okay, it was Donald Duck, actually Donald Duck Citrus Company at that time.
Oh, really?
It was somehow there was a connection there, and they were, how shall I say, the individuals who owned the grove and this type thing. And then there were several independent packers who had small plants, this kind of thing. Particularly, understand persons who had roadside stands. They dealt in the specialty fruits and this type of thing.
Okay. What are some of the types of fruits? The Valencias. What were some of the other, like the grapefruits called? Some of the varieties. Do you remember?
Duncan. It was your red grapefruit, your pink grapefruit. You had them that were white. You had ruby reds. Several different kinds. And the reason that the season was so long is that among the first oranges that you would pick were the Hamlins. Okay? From the Hamlins you would go into the pineapples. And from the pineapples into Parson Browns and Florida Commons, Indian River Commons, we used to call them. And from there, you would go, the last oranges that you would probably pick in the, how shall I say, for juice and this kind of thing, were the Valencias, which is my favorite orange. I'd rather have a Valencia orange than have any other kind. Okay? Although I don't raise that many of them, but that's my favorite.
Okay. Who can tell me something about the camps and who lived in the camps that were up here? In a place called the Quarters, what were the 3 camps or 4 camps that were there?
Well, Nevins had a camp down on the corner of Harry T. Moore and Wiley. Exchange had a camp set right on the Main Street. And those was the only 2 camps around here for Magna workers. So they would bring in, Nevins Fruit Company camp would hold a little over 100 head of people. So they had cooks in there to cook for those people, to keep and serve their food, and they charged them so much a week for eating. So both camps were working about the same way, you know. But you had to work strictly for the company that you stayed in their camp. You couldn't go out and work for nobody else.
About how many people lived in these camps?
Well, Nevins, a little over 100 head would live in those camps.
Oh.
Yeah, they had a lot of room in. They were big camps. And they had laundry rooms where they could wash their clothes and keep everything clean. And that was real nice. But I have seen some camps, I wouldn't let a dog live in it, you know. Then they got so bad with the camps. I've seen camps that you could stand here and see everything in there, you know, holes in the wall. Then the state taking over. Then they had to be governed and ruled by their control. And the state made sure that everything was up to par. You had to have glass windows, you had to have screen, you had to have screen doors. And they come around every Monday morning, checking. If anything, if a screen tore out, a screen door off, they write you up. And they'll give you a certain length of time to replace that week. They'll come back early, later on in the week and check again. Then if you don't have that fixed, then you wrote up and you got to pay a fine. So that was good. One of the good things that the state did when they taken over that. Because their people that owned these camps, they were just letting them run down and didn't care how people lived in them. But after the state come up, everything was up to par.
What was the typical wage? What was the typical wage for a grove worker? How did that stayed up to the, like for instance, what was the bottom wage and up to the top scale?
Well, the bottom wage was about $25 a week.
And who was that paid to?
That was paid to the workers. Now, if I was a man and I had 5 or 6 boys, and they was working for the same man that I was working for, well, they didn't pay the boy, they paid all the money to your dad.
I see.
So your dad was in fully control of everything. You were just working and he got the money. That's the way that went.
Okay.
And then it moved on up to like $35 a week. And 1964, I went to working for Mr. P.W. Robinson. He gave me $45 straight time a week, and I thought I was making big money then. $45 a week.
Woo!
And I worked there for a while, and then I finally told him, I said, well, I can't live out of that. I got to go further. So I went back and started doing other work, construction work, where I was making a couple $100 a week, you know. So that was much better. But they wasn't paying any money to be made in the grove. Only time you made money is when the season come for picking. Then they made money.
Yeah. How about the supervisors? Were there men who had, like the head of the groves, who were the supervisors or foremans?
Well, yeah, they had foremen over there. Now, I was a foreman, a subcontractor at least, on harvesting for Nevins Fruit Company. I worked for Nevins for about 40 years, and that's all I did. I carried a group of men. Sometimes, most of the time, I have like 25 to 30 head of men here. Then when I go north, I have 50 and 60 head of men.
Now, talking about going north, where are you referring to?
I'd be going all the way to New York, western New York.
Oh.
And then I was harvesting apples, cherries, grapes, peach, whatever they had to do.
So the orange pickers also went to harvest other crops up and down the coast.
Yes.
Yeah, if you was a good crew leader and they liked you, they'll follow you from one year to the other. I didn't care if you went to Maine, they'll follow you right on the Maine.
I see.
But now a lot of crew leaders
Treat them right.
treat them bad, but if you treated them right, I had guys who worked for me for 25 years. One guy. Then when I quit, some of the guys went to working for my son. You know, if I'd have been mean to them, the first thing they'd say, well, I'm not messing with you because your old dad wasn't no good. So I had a lot of guys work for me 25, 26 years, you know. Never did go nowhere else.
Let's talk to you. How about some of the other people that were in the area at the time? Can you relate any stories about some of the things that went on, like the fun times that you used to have, like after picking time or after harvest time, some of the things that the men and women used to do, or some of the, do you have any stories that you can relate about some fun times?
No, like I told you about me, it wasn't no fun time. I came up, like I said, from South Carolina. I told you I came here in 53. I don't know what I would think, but I came here in 1950.
Okay.
And even when I was home, they called me a workaholic. My goal was to try to have something. And Miss, I tell you the truth, I didn't have much fun because I would work, you know, day, and then sometime I would work at night. I've been around a lot of fun folks, all of them about dead now, because you know I'm old. I'm 74 years old. I'll be 75 next month. And well, we had some places we could go at night, you know. Years ago, they would call them a juke, but now they call them clubs.
Oh, juke joints. Okay. And where was the local juke joint?
Well, we had about 3 right in the neighborhood, right around in the neighborhood of Mem.
What was the best one?
Well, I would say the best one name was the Oasis.
Okay. And where was that located?
That was located on Harry T. Moore and what that street run out from there? Well, just about say on Harry T. Moore and it's a little lane back there. I forgot what it was, but it
Okay.
very located on Harry T. Moore.
Okay.
Back then they called it Main Street, up Palmetto, but now it's Harry T. Moore.
Okay.
I guess that was the main one, but we had other ones. which was kind of popular, but that was the popularest one.
Okay.
The old aces, and it's still standing there.
Okay. I understand that one of the favorite pastimes of the men was sometimes to sit under a tree and tell stories, sitting under the tree.
Yeah.
Can you relate any of the stories that were told that are tellable on film?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Oh, they're not tellable, huh?
Mr. Wilson ought to get that.
Mr.
I did
Wilson?
the same thing as the rest of them.
Mr. Wilson, how about you?
Saturday night, I went to the juke, you understand, and I bawled until I could grow tall. There was nothing that I wasn't big, bad, and bold enough not to do.
Okay, but that sort of was a good reward for working hard, long hours all day, right?
Yes,
Okay.
But see, I came up with a family straight.
Grandmother didn't play that.
They didn't pay. I was 74 years old, put all the cigarettes together, it wouldn't be a pack that I smoked. I didn't drink no kind of alcohol, not even beer. Put all the beer and wine together, it wouldn't be a half a gallon that I drunk in my whole life. And so, like I said, most of my goal was work and try to have something other when I get old. But I failed. I'm still old and got to work. But I can say I tried. I didn't have much fun. I didn't have much
You
fun.
worked hard your whole
I
life.
worked
God
hard.
bless you.
But I really planning on having some fun. And, in a few more months, I'm not going to be working anymore.
Oh, good. Let's talk about some of the times that happened in the days, like for instance, when a freeze came. How would you know a freeze was going to come? And what was typical about what you did when a freeze came along?
Well, they would always catch the news when the freeze is coming in. All right, then first started out, get that wood over there. First started out, they was firing the groves with wood.
Fire in a grove. Now, what are we talking about, fire in a grove? That's not setting a fire to the grove,
No,
right?
But what they would do, they would have two pieces of wood like this. And they would lay that right down here and cross it. Cross it just like that. Then they'll put some splinters in there. And they'll light that. Then they'll go right on down the middle of that grove like that. Then later years, yeah, just like that. They would light that. And you have to go along every now and then and put another piece of wood up on it to keep the fire going all night. You would walk all night long.
All up and down between the trees?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. All up and down between the trees.
And how many people would do this? A whole crew?
The whole crew.
My goodness.
You was working for Nevins, if they had 100 men working for them, with the grove they had that 100 men out there.
My
That
goodness.
night find the grove. Then the next day you have to find the grove all night with wood. Then the next day you got to go back and raise that wood all over again for the next night. All right, then they got modern. They moved up to these heaters here. Now when the freeze coming in, they had big tanks, like Mr. Wilson said, hold 200 and 300 gallons. And they'll go drive down the road. People have a hose going up, putting it in there and fill that up.
And what's that contraption called?
Diesel fuel.
Okay.
Diesel fuel, that's what they were using.
And that piece of equipment there is called what?
A heater.
A heater.
Grove heater.
Okay. All right.
Okay, if you want to see how I demonstrate on lighting that,
Okay.
we got this piece of paper here. So what we do, we'll like that. Oh, come on.
Okay. Now,
We'll let that burn down to the diesel, and then it'll light. Then we'll close this gate here.
okay. So there's diesel in there.
Diesel is in there.
Okay.
Oh.
principle.
Yeah, this,
There's the principle.
Okay. And that's what they do is they light that and the diesel is in there.
I gotta put it out.
Okay. So it has a damper on it?
Yeah.
And then that would make the smoke like that?
Well, it won't be any smoke.
Give up the heat.
You wouldn't see anything but heat.
Oh, so it would just be the heat coming out from it. Okay. Now, let me you show me that damper down there. How do you control that?
Okay, it got 3 holes down here. Now that's low. Then the next hole get a little bigger. Now that you got 2 holes, you got a full hole.
Full sack.
Then that's the last hole. That's the big one. It's wide open now.
Okay, and you would use that if it was real cold,
Well, you
or progress it.
what you would probably do after it get hot, you set it on about 1 and just let it 1.5 and just let it burn there. Then that would burn all night, probably 24 hours. Then they'll come back the next day, refueling these things up for the next night.
I see. So that puts out quite a bit of heat.
Oh yeah, a lot of heat.
Okay. And what you would do then is set this between 2 trees.
Yeah, just like this, the middle trees running this way. We got one sitting here. We go back to that oak tree and set another one right on down the road, just like that.
Okay. And how would you refuel these? You had a truck that would go through the groves to refuel them?
Yes, they had churches that put in these big tanks. A man, they run in this mill, a man on this side with a long hose, a man on that side with a long hose. One filling up these tanks on this side, one filling up tanks on the other side.
I see.
And they just go right on down until they get everything filled up.
And they would do this every night?
Every day.
Every day?
Yeah.
Until the
It
freeze
depends
was in.
on how long the cold stays in.
I see. I see. Well, that puts out quite a bit of heat, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
You only needed to raise the heat, you understand, up above 27 degrees. If you get it above 27 degrees, nothing will freeze. Okay? But if it drops down to 22 and you don't do some fast heating or fast firing, then you're going to have, you understand, a crop that would be lost. And after you get down to 20, 17, 18, 20 degrees, you start to lose trees. And it is better to lose a crop than it is to lose a tree. Next year, if the tree is not killed, you can put a crop on. But if that tree is killed, then you got to plant one, and it's going to take you 10 years to recoup.
Okay.
Because when it's 10 years old, you might get maybe a box and a half of oranges off it, where you were getting 10 or 12 boxes off of this other tree.
I see.
Okay?
Okay. So it was more important to save the tree than the crop?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
definitely.
Okay. Would the fruit then fall off the trees to the ground?
Much of it would split, fall off to the ground. The trees themselves, you could be in a grove and doing a severe freeze, you could hear the limbs splitting. Pow! Sound like a rifle. Okay?
Yeah.
And so basically, understand what you wanted to do, you would not mind saving the crop, but you definitely wanted to save the tree.
I see. I see. So what would happen to those oranges that fell to the ground?
If you got them up in a few days, if they were mature, they would take them over at most plants and they would juice them. First they would test them to see how badly they were hurt and all this type of thing, see if you had any rotted ones in there, bad ones that had turned to wine, or the juice had turned to wine or vinegar. And if there were too many of them, if they had turned to wine, then you just got rid of those. But if they were still solid and this type thing, then they would juice them. So basically you could salvage many times some of the oranges if it stayed cool enough. But now I've seen it 22 degrees today, tomorrow down to 17, 18 and this type thing. And then much of the fruit would fall to the ground. And all of a sudden, being in Florida, you had a day in which during the middle of the day it was 80 degrees. Now you got a problem, okay? Because the oranges would thaw. See, as long as they were frozen, basically the sacks in there, you understand, would hold some of the juice in this type thing. But once they thawed, you could go by a grove and you could smell it a quarter-mile away.
And then they would be all ruined.
All ruined. So what you would do is go in with a grove chopper or this type thing and just chop it into the ground. Hope that it would biodegrade and help to feed the tree. Okay.
Yeah, I want to take a close-up of this and to see what this says on the manufacturer. That's good. It's a high-low heater. SCHEU Produce Company, Upland, California. And about what circa is this? What year would this be?
That's about 1965.
About a 1965. And this is fueled by diesel.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now the old ones, before they were fueled by diesel, what did you used to put in them?
They use the same thing.
Same thing, okay. And this was used all during the 50s and 60s?
During the
60s. And of course the EPA came in and said that we couldn't use them. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Not only were they polluting the air, but they were polluting your pocket. Because if for every night that you burned one, diesel today is what? Diesel costs more than gasoline.
$2 a gallon.
And so basically, you understand, if you put $5 in this one, and you got 1,000 of them, like Nevins had, you understand, throughout the grove, you were talking about $10,000 a night.
Oh.
Okay?
Yeah.
So unless you really into the money, you say, well, Lord, protect those trees. You can have the crop.
Okay. So is that when the water sprinkler system came in, where
Yes.
they used the overhead sprinkler systems?
Yes.
Okay. And then how did that work? How did the water sprinkler system work?
Well, basically, what they did, you understand, was that they would drill wells throughout the area, and when I say the area, your fields, on your property. You could not use my water, you had to use yours, okay? So you'd have wells and you would have it piped throughout your grove. And the sprinkler system, you understand, if you had it from the ground up, you'd have pumps that would pump the water, and since the water was coming out of the earth, it'd say like 70, 72 degrees, whatever it was, you understand. Then when you sprayed it, the heat from the water would rise among the trees, and many times it would coat the tree, and it would keep it alive.
They would actually ice over, wouldn't they?
And become an insulation, right. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that would do it. Then the overhead sprinklers, you understand, they had to pump it up above the tree, and it sprinkled down, and it was the same principle, you understand, to coat it and hope that the heat from the water, you understand, would aid the tree, keep it from freezing, and once it was coated over, it would be like an overcoat.
So actually it was more, and again, this is a way of saving the tree and not necessarily the fruit. As long as the fruit did not defrost, so to speak, it was usable, and they made juice out of it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But basically, understand, as a politician told me that, and I'm not going to ever call his name because I don't want to be sued, that orange trees don't vote and people do. And in most of the areas where you now have homes being built, condominiums and this type thing, one condominium has 500 people in it. 250 of them are voters. All right? Maybe 300. And there's Mr. Mitchell and his two boys, you understand. They can't outvote those those people in the condominium. So you don't waste the water on the trees. Water is the one thing in Florida that's going to stop our growth. Okay? See, I don't mind if I had to, couldn't do anything better. I might drink my sewage, but I don't want to drink yours. All right?
Let's talk about one of the interesting facts and the reason that we're doing this documentation is that the citrus industry in Florida is gone by the wayside and has fallen to huge developments taking over the land. What is your thoughts on that? When did you start seeing the groves gone, and what was the indicator, like the freezes in the 80s? Let's talk about that, all three of you.
During the 80s, we had a series of freezes, and much of the citrus in central Florida was hurt. It was hurt badly, and many of the growers in the central part of the state begun to move south. And basically they planted acres and acres of oranges and this type thing. But there is the idea that wherever you have agriculture, or you have agricultural goods, in most instances, you must have water. Orange trees, then again, they don't like wet feet. They like high ground that is reasonably moist but not wet. And as a result, in many of the areas that growers went to, there came a rainy season. And during the rainy season, water puddled. And once the water puddled, there was no place to put it. I could not ship my water over into Mr. Mitchell's grove, and Mr. Mitchell would get angry, understand, and we'd have confrontation or this kind of thing. And Mr. Moore, he didn't want both of us pumping our water to him because he couldn't do anything with it. And as a result, in many areas, you have, how shall I say, you're on the floodplain. Mm-hmm. And as a result, you have to have dikes, ditches, canals, this kind of thing to try to move the water. But once that is done, it affects the supply of water for human beings. Mm-hmm. And as a result, when the condominiums were being built down in the southern part of the state, along the coast, and even in inland, you had people saying, you understand, that you're wasting the water. You're using it unnecessarily to supply these growers of citrus, of all of the products that you have. And as a result of the freeze, those people who went south left us here. And since land here, much of it is high and dry, it has more value, a quicker value for building than it does for agricultural purposes. Mm-hmm. And basically, people decided that it is more profitable to raise houses than it is to raise trees. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Let me ask you this. What happened, Mr. Mitchell, in your estimation, what's happened to the migrant workers when the groves went away? What other jobs did they seek employment did they seek to make a living?
Well, most of them, they just strayed away and went different places. They forgot all about the citrus, you know. It was going down, and they knew it was going down. And I told a lot of them myself. I said, what you guys need to do now, I said, you see this citrus going down? You need to go off and get your job with benefits. I said, working citrus is not a job, it's just a hustle, you know, because they come out and work today and I pay them today, you know, and they ain't got no benefits or no nothing. So then the Mexicans, they could get their work did so much cheaper by transporting Mexicans in. So the Mexican is just done taking over, and they taking over everywhere you go. Now I used to carry 60 up to 100 head of men, and Mr. Moore tell you for working for me in New York. Now you can't hardly find an American guy works that up there. It's Mexican or Haitian. That's all they got. They bring them in. So the American guys just got away from it, and then the American people got so lazy. So they had to bring somebody in to do the work.
Yeah.
You know, and just like Mr. Wilson said, on this water system, we needed water, but this freeze came in, it damaged us real hard. Then he said they all moved south. Then the storm waters outfit, they went to cutting dams and blocking the water off. That's when we have such a drought up here, they won't let the water come through now. I was working 18 years ago down there building dams, you know, blocking the water to keep it from coming up. So that hurt this awful bad. So and the magnet workers just faded on out for our American magnet workers. So they got a lot of Haitians and Mexicans because they can get them much cheaper than they can American man.
Yeah.
One thing that helped the magnet workers in this community, when the Space Center came in, I would say 40 or 50% of the road workers went over and got jobs, you know, with benefits and better pay, you know, but there were some that couldn't go over there and get a job. Some of them was too old, and you know, and then some of them didn't even want that kind of job because see, they done did this kind of work so long, and they got addicted to it. They thought that's all they could do, but 40% of them went up on the Space Center, and all of them got good jobs, and they come out, and then the one that stayed, like myself, and didn't go, feel the pinch right about now.
Let me ask you this, all three of you. When you all worked the groves, what were some of the hardships that you endured as far as medical benefits, housing, that type of thing? How did you acquire medical benefits?
Well, basically, understand, one of the things that you're looking at in this area was that many of the people who were not migratory workers had their own small plots of land, and they built houses on them. It might be a shack, but it was his shack, okay? And as long as I own property, then I have something that I can get something on, all right? And most of the doctors and the hospitals, if you have some cash, they will accept you. And many of the guys, you understand, who worked for particular men over a period of time, if they needed $1,000, they go to a man and say, hey, I need $1,000, I'll pay you back next season, okay? And as a result, they did not suffer as the migratory workers did. For an example, I know some people who the family worked for a family for over 70 years. And it got to be more of a situation in which if this person needed something, he'd simply go and say, hey, Chief, I need such and such a thing. No problem. Fellow, who do you work for? Well, I work for Mr. Ubladi. And Well, what do you need? They give it to you. I built a duplex, and I'm sorry to say this. I built a duplex and had $50. But the way that I built it was that the person whom I approached, an individual who was on the board of directors of a bank, and I think he told me that there were 7 people on that board, and he told them that, look, this man needs such and such a thing. His family has worked with my family for this number of years, and 6 of the people knew my relatives. So there was no doubt, you understand, I get whatever I wanted. Because I asked them for one amount of money, and they told me, no, we're going to let you have double that. You draw it down as you need it. See, because we don't want, and I'm not an exception, okay? Mm-hmm. That has happened in this area. We don't want you to get halfway through and then need something. You do it. And this kind of thing. So many of the independent, these guys were independent. They did not live in camps or this kind of thing. They lived on their own places. And as a result, you understand, they could afford many things that other people could not.
Mm-hmm. Because they were established in the neighborhood.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And another thing I could say of me, see, I went to the service when I was young. First, when I was young, I didn't get sick, you know. But I went to the service when I was young. When I came out, I had the service benefit. You know, I would go to the VA because I never did have no sufficient insurance, you know. But I had the VA. I could because I did my little tour in the service, and that's what helped me out a lot.
And
anytime you were working for a company and you had a position, they would give you all the benefits. And I was supposed to be one of the high men at the place, so I had all the benefits that they had. I had the retirement, I had the insurance and everything. So it didn't hurt me, and I had my own home. I never rented in my life, so that's what helped me. And then furthermore, the magnet workers didn't get sick like people get sick now. They work all the time, and you never see one sick, you know. If you see one get hurt, one of the guys hurt him, then you got to carry him to the hospital. By me being the foreman and the boss, I carry him on to the hospital. They're going to wait on him, wrap him up, send him on back. We come on back and work him. That's about the benefit of it.
Okay.
That's about all I know about that.
What's his name?
Okay.
I ain't gonna call his name, but
how about telling me about some of the old timers in the area?
some of the old timers, there was a lot of peoples here that need jobs and need to work. So if I was working for Mr. Wilson, I'll use him then because he's here.
Right.
And Mr. Moe, I go to Mr. Moe for a job. First thing Mr. Moe asked me, he said, who you work for? I said, I've been working for Mr. Wilson. He said, well, I can't give you no job right now. Let me go talk with Mr. Wilson. So if he go to Mr. Wilson today, I goes back to him tomorrow. He said, well, Mitch said, I can't use you. If you couldn't get along with Mr. Wilson, I know you can't get along with me. So that's just the way it was. You know, I couldn't leave Mr. Wilson and go to Mr. Moe. They wouldn't hire you until they go and talk with one another. And that made it hard for you, you know, because some of those guys was dogging the guys and they wanted to leave those places, you know. But they couldn't leave because they didn't have nowhere else to go. And furthermore, see, wasn't nothing in here until the cake come in, but a sawmill, and out here on 10 Time Road at 10 Time still, and the fruit entrance in. That's all you had to rely on.
Oh,
Then later on down the Patrick Air Force Base, come in the Navy days.
Yeah.
And they went to work.
Naval Station.
And then from that, civil service taking over. And they went to hire. And it just went to growing just like that. And then the people got to be independent. So then Mr. Wilson would work anybody come to him. Mr. Moe would work anybody come to him. Then ask no question then, you know, because they needed him. That's about the biggest story I know, how they used to dog us out. Wouldn't work one another unless Mr. Moe said so.
Well, I got a little story. I was working for a company years ago. It was about 10 or 12 of us working. We was in the grove mowing, you know, with a sling blade. And we had a boss man, and he eased up to me and said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to the store for a minute. I want you to watch these other fellas and see that they work." You know, so I would watch him go down to the other fella, but I didn't know he was telling them the same thing he was telling me, you know. And so after he tells me that, you know, I kind of thought I was kind of like, you know, a little above the rest of the fellas. Come to find out, he was telling the whole 10 or 12 had the same thing. So we was just everybody watching one another.
Oh, that's
his
so.
name. Oh, Herbert Hale, boy. Hey, Johnny,
Don't
you
call
watch
no
your
name.
Mitch. Mitch, you watch your Moe.
Well, this has been a wonderful story today, and I appreciate y'all coming by. And I'd like to talk to you another time about the sawmills and the turpentine, and if you'd like to join me for that, I think that would be a good documentation on that.
But that'll be Mr. Mitchell.
Okay.
Time and because we don't know too much about that. In fact, I don't know nothing about the turpentine, but he'll be really.
Okay, well, Mr. Mitchell, I'd like to talk about, and I believe it was Kelly's turpentine.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, and maybe we can sit down sometime at a later date and talk about that. I sure would appreciate it.
right.
Well, thank you all for coming today, and this has been a great documentation of the citrus industry in North Brevard. Thank you. One of the things that I would like you to relate to me is when you put in a grove, what were the dimensions and how many trees went into a typical grove?
In the old days, most groves that are around North Brevard were planted either on a 25 by 25 spacing, tree to tree, center of the tree to the center of the tree, 25 feet. And at the rate of 25 feet, you would get in approximately 76, 79 trees, depending upon, you understand, whether it was a true square that you were using. And as a result, most groves that had 10 acres of orange trees in it would have somewhere between 760 to say 800 trees.
That was a lot of trees, yeah. And how long did it take for a tree from the time that you planted it to the first yield for commercial?
Depending upon the age of the tree when you put it in the grove. If the tree that you're planting in the grove had been, say, in a nursery for 3 years, and you kept it healthy and this type thing, at the end of 10 years, it would be big enough to bear perhaps a box of fruit. But if you had not cared for it, and this type thing, you're on ant, to care for it, feed it, and keep the vines and this type thing off it, then you might go in, you might get anywhere from a dozen oranges to none. Okay? So trees you had to nurse as you would a baby. You feed them, you care for them, and then they produce. If you don't feed them and care for them, they don't thrive, and they might even die on you. But the average tree at 10 years old will start to return some of the money that you have spent in planting it and getting it together.
Okay, this is a typical fruit box that they used to pick and put the oranges in. And I notice on the front it has a name on it that says Black Grove. Where was Black Grove?
It was probably located near Oviedo, which is in Seminole County, just across the St. Johns River, west of Mint.
And this was a typical box that you would fill up and be priced at, correct?
This is what we used originally.
Okay. And that was
Wooden box.
and that was hand carried in the grove?
They would load them on a truck, and guys like Mr. Mora, who was a loader, would bring them in, they'd kick them off, and each picker would go and get a number of boxes. If he wanted 10 boxes, he'd get 10 boxes, take them and lay them near his tree or his trees, and he would work them into the road. See them load them by himself.
Let me ask you, how much would that weigh when that was full of oranges?
They tell me that they 90 pounds, but many of them would weigh 100, 125, okay, depending upon the juice content and that kind of thing, if it was oranges. Grapefruit, it would be lighter because grapefruit are large and it wouldn't take as many to fill it up.